Adam Bandt is the Greens leader and he joins me live from Canberra. Adam Bandt, welcome to 7:30.
Thank you for having me on.
As you decide whether to vote for the safeguard mechanism, what lesson do you draw from the Greens' decision in 2009 to vote down the Labor government's emissions reduction scheme?
Well, looking back over recent years, of course, last year we backed the new government's climate target, even though we didn't think it was enough because it enabled us to take a first step, a small step on the road to the climate emergency. And of course, back in 2010, we worked with the Labor government to put in place a world-leading climate legislation. So I think the lesson that we draw is that the Greens are ready to work in this parliament to pass laws that will cut pollution. But key to doing that is tackling coal and gas. Coal and gas are the main causes of the climate crisis. Pollution from coal and gas has to start coming down. We want to vote for laws that will see coal and gas pollution come down in this country, not go up, because you can't put the fire out while you're pouring petrol on it, and the government's desire to open up new coal and gas projects is the sticking point for us at the moment.
I just want to understand, though, because politics is also about learning lessons from history. In that 2009 decision, is the lesson that you drew from that there is no problem voting down climate legislation and sending everybody back to the drawing board?
Well, we've consistently voted for climate legislation as well. And the point that I'm making is that here in 2023, we've just had an election where the Australian people saw the government's vote, Labor's vote, go backwards, the coalition's vote go backwards, and a record number of people voted for the Greens and for independents. And the parties that said that they wanted more coal and gas saw their vote go backwards. The parties that said we need to stop opening up coal and gas saw our votes go up. Now, in this parliament, Labor does not have a majority in the Senate. They're going to need to work with others in order to get legislation passed.
All right,
we're up for that, and we've made an offer to pass the legislation.
Well, let's talk about that. You're demanding that there be no coal and gas projects. You've made that very clear. How would new projects impact the safeguard mechanism that the government wants you to vote for?
Well, so the offer that we've made, and it's not an ultimatum, it's an offer. The offer that we've made is to say we'll put aside our concerns about the corporations being able to buy their way out of the scheme through offsetting, through tree planting schemes and the like. We'll put aside our concern that the government's target is weak, sees the end of the Great Barrier Reef. We'll put aside the fact that it's Tony Abbott's reheated mechanism. We'll support the legislation and we'll vote for it in Parliament tomorrow with one change. Stop making the problem worse. Stop opening up new coal and gas projects.
As you are aware, that is a massive ask that you are putting to the government. Is there any way that the government can convince you that the safeguard mechanism could adjust to manage emissions from new projects?
Well, I'd say two things. One is in terms of the level of the ask. As you've heard, we're not asking for the perfect, we're just asking for the bare minimum. And that is, don't make the problem worse while we're trying to fix it. And on this, we've got the science and the people on our side. This is the bare minimum of what we need to do to ensure that our kids have a chance at a safe climate. In terms of what could change, there's the way the government has designed the safeguard mechanism is that it's leaving open a lot of space for new entrants into the scheme. The government's own emissions projections say that there's 6 big new gas projects that they want to get underway before 2030. And to give you a bit of an idea of the scale of these, just one of those, the Scarborough project alone off the coast of Western Australia, will emit more climate pollution before 2030 than would be potentially saved from the whole of the scheme put together. So we're dealing with these massive climate bombs, and really we've made a good faith offer. And the ball is in the government's court now to explain why they want to keep opening up new coal and gas mines in the climate crisis.
Let me just jump in there. You've actually asked for this to be written into legislation. You know that no government is going to do this, don't you?
Well, US President Barack Obama used his legislative powers to say he wasn't going to allow exploration for new coal on federal lands because he could see the scale of the climate crisis. Other countries are listening to the International Energy Agency, the world scientists, the UN Secretary General, who are all saying we can't open up new coal and gas projects and still meet our climate targets. Now, Others have come along and put some other proposals on the table and said, well, what about changing our environment laws, for example, so that new coal and gas projects can't get off the ground because of the impact that they're going to have on the climate. Others, the Climate Council has said, well, look, why don't we pause all new coal and gas projects until...
Are all of these ideas seriously under consideration by you at this moment?
We would consider any proposals in good faith that are put on the table to deal with this question of coal and gas. We want to pass laws that will see pollution from coal and gas come down in this country, and that's ultimately the test for us of a good climate policy. Does coal and gas pollution go down or up? And at the moment, even on Labor's own figures, pollution from coal and gas goes up under their policy.
Another critical sticking point that was raised today by Senator Pocock is the question of carbon offsets in the legislation, by which, as we just saw a little bit of this, that polluting facilities can offset up 100% of their emissions. If these offset schemes were guaranteed to produce big emission reductions for the country, why shouldn't some companies be able to do that?
Look, if you're talking about the cement manufacturer or the glass manufacturer or aluminium, we want to see those industries thrive. Those industries have a future in the green economy. Green steel, for example, is energy intensive, yes, but we can, with research and investment, we can do it cleanly. What we're talking about, though, is coal and gas. So we understand the particular situation that genuine Australian industry finds itself in, and we're willing to work on that to ensure that we see those industries thrive. But coal and gas are in a different category, and we know coal and gas are what is causing the climate crisis. The other industries aren't causing the climate crisis. Coal and gas is. That's why we say that we can't have coal and gas continuing to expand and think we can fix the climate crisis.
Let's go to that position on the projects, because the competition regulator is warning of a serious gas shortfall. Are you saying that the Australian public should put up with shortages of gas?
We don't need new coal and gas projects to power our economy. Australia is awash with gas at the moment. The problem is the greedy gas corporations suck it out of the ground and then sell it all off overseas, and then what's left gets sold to Australian business and householders at sky-high prices. And
the majority of those contracts are long-term contracts, and I don't think I understand you to say that you would disrupt those long-term contracts, causing potential sovereign risk to Australia.
Well, we've just given the government the power at the end of last year to reserve as much gas as is needed for the Australian population, Australian business and Australian people while we make the transition, and also to help regulate the price. That wasn't our preferred approach, to have a gas reservation, but we supported the government on that, in part because it is now clear the government has all the powers that it needs to reserve the gas that is needed while we make the transition. I don't think anyone's actually put the argument that somehow that would compromise international contracts.
Well, let me put this to you. The ACCC says that the shortfall of gas between 2024 and 2034 could be as much as 300 petajoules. Now, that's half of this year's entire supply. Are you suggesting putting that at risk?
Well, we're saying two things. One is the government now has the power to deal with that by reserving as much gas as is needed for Australia and putting Australia first. And that is something that the government has that power because we gave it to them. Second is that it is crystal clear that when you look at it from a climate perspective, everyone, the scientists, the experts, including those who are looking at the safeguard mechanism, are all saying if we open up new projects, we're going to blow our climate goals. Just today, the government's own modellers that they use for their own scheme.
You shared that information. Let me just come back to you, Adam Bank, because we're running out of time. But I just want to go back to the idea that everything has to be perfect on day one. The European emissions reduction scheme was a flawed and very modest scheme at the outset that gave too much away to big polluters. But it's now embedded and it's a global gold standard. Why not let a policy get embedded and then work with the government to improve it?
Well, that's what we're offering to do. We've got an offer on the table to pass the legislation tomorrow.
Except that you're asking the government to do something that you know they cannot and will not do.
But what we don't want is to do this good work in Parliament and pass a scheme on Monday and then have it undone on Tuesday when the government opens a new gas project that blows the budget. So if we're serious about this, yes, we'll put something in place. Will it be everything that the Greens want? It probably won't be. Will it be everything that the government wants? They're going to have to give a bit as well. In this Parliament where power is shared, because that's what the Australian people wanted, we're all going to have to work together. And for us, we're saying very, very clearly, we will put aside our concerns with the government's legislation, pass it, give the scheme a chance to get running, but we've got to deal with this question of coal and gas because you can't put the fire out while you're pouring petrol on it. The people and the science are all saying, you know, as we watch the floods and the fires and the droughts hit us, stop opening new coal and gas mines.
It sounds like you've already reached your red line. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Adam Bandt.
Well, I don't know that that's a fair summation of it, but we're in good faith negotiations and we'll continue them.
Thank you.